Hello, hi guys. So thank you for joining today. And I want to talk about today. We're going to talk about travel. And joining us is a very, very special guest. Her name is Elona Karafin. She's a travel content creator and a cancer survivor. And Elona is a very inspiring young woman. So she discovered she had cancer at the age of 10, and she underwent chemotherapy treatment and multiple surgeries and is now cancer free. She was a full-time financial analyst in New York City before before she transitioned into becoming a full-time travel content creator and blogger. And she very much believes that people don't have to quit their full-time jobs in order to enjoy traveling the world. And she believes it's entirely possible to travel the world and work a full-time job. So today she will share with us her tips on how she does long weekend getaways and how to spend smartly when traveling. So I'm going to bring Elona onto our live, and I hope you guys are having a good day. Hi Elona.
Hey
How are
girl.
you doing?
I'm all right. Thank you for having
Thank
me.
you so much for joining us. You look very well and very fresh.
Thank you, because I was in the sun all weekend, so I feel
Yeah.
good.
Yeah. What time is it there in New York now? It's 10 a.m., right?
Yeah, it's 10 a.m. Nice and
Yeah.
early.
Yes, it's 10 p.m. where I am now. So Ilona, thank you so
Well,
much.
thank you for accommodating this time.
Oh, no problem, no problem. I think a lot of people in Asia are online at night anyway, so I think it's all good. And yeah, I just wanted to say thank you so much for joining us today. I think we're very fortunate to have you join us. And as I was sharing with
Thank you.
our viewers earlier, you have such an inspiring story to tell, which you will share today. But Ilona, you survived cancer as a kid, and since then you've come a long way, through working full time, and now you've established yourself as a travel content creator and blogger. You're advising people that working and traveling is entirely possible. Working a full-time job and traveling weekends is entirely
Yes.
possible. So Ilona, tell us how you did it.
Well, where do you want me to start? So I think from the perspective of actually like getting to where I am today into the travel blogging space, it kind of happened by accident.
Yeah.
So I was working full time. So I was a business major in college, and I just like every business major, I had to have an internship in like my junior, senior year, and I had a finance internship that ended up turning into a full-time job. And in the States, our mentality is all about you work all those long hours, you raise as much money as you save as
Yeah.
much money as you possibly can, and then like you retire young. You don't take days off. That's very taboo. So that's basically the situation I was in, and I was very
Yeah.
lucky to have a boss manager at the time who was like, "Listen, you're burning out. You have days off. Why don't you just go somewhere?" And I traveled like to Ukraine, nothing too substantial at the time. So I decided to take some time off, and I went to the UAE,
Okay.
and I went there for like four days, and people thought I was crazy. They were like, "Who goes to the other side of the planet for four
For four
days?
days.
Wasting 12 hours in flight?" And
How long is the
I
flight
used to
from New
think
York
that
to Dubai?
15 hours, well,
Oh,
like 14
wow.
maybe. 12 to Qatar, yeah, so maybe like another two to Dubai. Yeah, so
Yeah.
I mean, it's a long flight. But people like thought I was crazy. But when I was in that moment, I was like, this is very doable, like, and this
Hmm.
was okay, this was Dubai. But now imagine if I take like a 6 hour flight to London, or like a couple of hours to Central America, then then timing isn't an issue. So
Yeah.
many people were asking me questions about my trips, and I kind of just started getting annoyed, getting repetitive. So I decided to put it on a website.
Yeah.
I had like no idea, what a blog was at the time. But so yeah, and I put it up on the website, and then people started catching up to it, and I kept traveling on long weekends, posting my itineraries, posting what I was
Yeah.
doing. And eventually, it got picked up by publications, and they were like, wow, are you really working full time? I didn't think anything of it. I didn't think I was doing anything, extra like special at the time. So yeah, so it kind of just fell into the space, organically.
Okay. Yeah, yeah. Well, that's a great story actually to tell because, I think a lot of people they want to travel, but then they find that perhaps they're constrained by leave, right? How many days of leave you can take a year. And as you said, it's entirely possible to work a full-time job and also travel on the weekends. And you are an example of doing that successfully. So so
So I think,
mhm,
to that point, I think it's important to note, the difference between vacation and travel. So like
yeah,
I totally understand that there are, that people that burn out, that work super long hours and they just want to lay on a beach for a week without doing anything. You know what I mean? And it's
yeah,
totally understandable. Like I've been there, my parents do this, I have many family members that do this. But if you are actually eager to explore many different places and actually explore cultures, explore local foods, and kind of go around, right? Then it is possible. The point is that it is possible to do it in a short period of time. It is
yeah,
possible to do it on a budget, and it is possible to do it while you're working full time. But vacation is different, and for some people, vacation and travel overlap, like for me. But I totally understand, like if you're burning out and you want to take a week long trip, then that's fully within your right. It's just a
yeah.
different dynamic.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
interesting that you mentioned that, which is one of the questions I wanted to ask. So you said there's a difference between a vacation and travel, right? So for example, you've been on holidays to say like Bali from New York. You took a 26-hour flight from New York City to Bali. For how many days was it? You said 3 nights, right?
Yeah, yeah. That was one of like the crazier, like back in the day trips. I don't know if I would repeat it, but yeah, it was 3 nights and I had a really long layover in Shanghai. So it was nice
Okay.
because I got to do Shanghai in like 12
Oh,
hours, I
wow.
believe the
So not
layover
just
was, which
Bali
was
in 3 nights, but
fantastic.
yeah, it includes Shanghai as well.
Including yeah, yeah. So it was really nice. I got to kick off two birds with
Yeah.
one stone.
Yeah. So how do you do it? I mean, do you feel exhausted? Like when you after a 26-hour flight, do you feel like, you're exhausted, you're jet lagged, all you want to do is sleep in a hotel? But at the same time, do you feel the stress and the pressure of, no, I have to, complete my itinerary because I've spent all this money to come here and I have spent all this time to travel all the way to Bali. So how
Yeah.
how do you handle that?
Yeah. That's a great question. So I think there are definitely like subconscious factors that come into play that are like nudging you internally, and you're like, okay, I just took a 20-hour flight. I only have 3 nights. I need to make the best of it.
Yeah.
For me, when I started doing these long weekends, my goal wasn't to see everything possible. In some places, that's what I wanted to do, but that was never like my goal. My goal was to kind of try different pieces of the world and see, okay, well, if I enjoyed Bali in 3 days, I could always come back. Like that's
Yeah.
kind of the mindset that I had. So I got a little bit of taste of every single pie, and then I figured out what I like more, what I like less. And I would always just return to those destinations. But back to the initial question, so I've kind of devised like a strategy for myself when I would
Okay.
arrive into a destination. If I was let's say if I was on a red-eye flight, I would get to I would make myself rest as much as I wanted to during that day. So I would get like a full night's of sleep. I like to go to sleep early. I wake up early anyway, as
Yeah.
is. So I would arrive in a destination, I would rest, I would give myself that time, and then I would kind of
Okay.
venture off. And those, once you're somewhere for a very short period of time, you definitely want to get as much as possible done. So you
Yeah.
kind of just, it you get that pressure. But I think it's very
Yeah.
important to just have the right mindset. When people say, oh, I'll never be able to do this, or maybe one day, I don't believe in statements like that. I tell myself, okay, I really enjoyed it. I didn't get to see everything. I could come back. And I could come back if I want to next month or the month after that. Like in theory.
Yeah, yeah. And I
Yeah.
think also the other thing is that, there are so many places in the world to explore and to go to. If we always kind of put it off and say, oh, next time, oh, there'll be a next time, sometimes you
It's
don't
just
get
never
to,
gonna happen.
yeah. So sometimes I think, like you said, if you really want to go somewhere and you have that time or that long weekend that you can, take a day off on Friday or Monday and make it a 4-day trip, like you often do, then you can
Absolutely.
actually, and you tell yourself, I'm just going to go there and I'm going to make the most out of the 3 full days that I have there. And actually, you'd be surprised, right? And I'm sure you know that, like in 3 days, you can actually cover quite a lot of places.
Absolutely. And just to on that note, it's a subconscious barrier that you put
Yeah.
onto yourself when you say things like, well, one day I'll do this, or well, 3 days is not enough, so I'll wait until I have a week, you know? And I think people really overlook that having this type of mentality just creates kind of like the ceiling on top of you. You don't even know it's there. You created it for yourself, but that someday, one day, eventually, it never happens. You know what I mean? And when it does, it's like it's a rarity. It really is. So
Yeah.
I think that's the first thing that people need to work on is like what happens up here, you know?
Yeah, yeah. Okay. So I like the tip that you shared, which is when you get to a destination, I suppose then you try and plan your flights such that you arrive quite, in the evening so that you can go there, get a good, 7, 8 hours sleep, get up, and then you're fresh and ready to go, right?
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. That's a huge factor because if you're trying to maximize your time, you want to make sure that the flight either arrives early in the morning, like on a red eye, so you sleep on the plane, or you arrive late at night. Late at night is a little tricky because then you kind of have to pay for that extra hotel night.
Yeah, yeah, that's true.
So, if you're trying to maximize finances and time, then the ideal flight is the one that gets you in the
Early in the
morning, gives you
morning.
the entire day. Yeah. And it helps to have certain things planned,
Okay.
so I don't always plan my trips, but if I'm very interested in a destination and I want to maximize my time, I try to create spreadsheets of at least like plan A, plan B, plan C of what I want to do.
Yeah.
And that subconsciously, like, kind of like having a checklist, it creates this mentality of, okay, I have to get this done, or I want to get this done, and you end up
Yeah.
getting more done for sure.
Yeah, and I think that's the other thing, right? That's very important. It's planning your itinerary because you don't want to waste time on the trip, on the holiday, trying to figure out where to go to. And sometimes, often, I think with
Yeah,
cities, when the city is quite big, you want to plan strategically to go from place A to B to C to D
yes,
rather than A to D back to B and to C, and then you kind of waste time
exactly.
traveling instead of doing it strategically.
Exactly. Or like places like in the Middle East, like in Abu Dhabi, for example, the mosque is closed on Fridays at night for prayer.
Yeah,
And if you're coming for a weekend and you know that Friday is the only day that you'll be in Abu Dhabi in the UAE, you might want to plan it the other way around, so you get so like the little things like that. It's definitely good to plan, even though I don't always plan, but for some places, I think strategically that's
yeah.
the right way to do it.
Yeah, no, I think that's a very good point. And the other thing is how far in advance do you plan your trips? Like say you want to plan a long weekend to go somewhere. Do you plan it in 2 months in advance, a year in advance, or a few weeks in advance?
So I think if you're in a full-time position, if you have a job, then it definitely needs some planning. Depending, so like my role in my previous job was, I could only do the tasks that I do. Nobody else could do them for me. But
Right.
I knew that once I finished those tasks, I am good to go for a certain amount of time. And I always had my laptop with me. I was basically, if you want people to be lenient with you, you have to be super accommodating to them, especially if
Yeah.
it's your boss. So I was always available online, and if like someone needed to call me, it doesn't matter what time or day, I had to make myself available because they were
Yeah.
lenient by letting me go, so often. So I would say planning in advance is probably to the best of, your interests and the interests of your employer if you want to do this more often, so to say. Right now, I mean, I sometimes plan my trips like 2 days in advance,
Wow.
so it's like, yeah, like I've had trips where I left the next day. Like last year when I went to Namibia, I got my tickets 4 days before flying
Namibia.
out to Namibia, and this was like to Africa. Yeah, so like it depends. But if you're working full time, at least give yourself like a month buffer. Plus it
Yeah.
gives you time to really kind of see where the ticket prices change, and
Yeah.
things like that. So I think time is actually of a benefit to you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks for sharing with us your tips on how you plan these long weekend getaways. I think there's a lot of things to kind of take from there. In terms of how you spend wisely on travel, um, what would you say is the best time in advance, since we're talking about, planning, what would you say is the best time in advance to book your flight, your accommodation, and plan your holiday such that you kind of take advantage of the most economical prices? Would it be kind of last minute flight prices, hotel prices, or 2 months in advance or a year in advance?
To be honest with you, I think that now the timing is not as relevant as it used to be back in the day, because now, like, this is really the golden age of travel. And I'm kind of separating the COVID situation because
Yeah.
we really, it's going to change air travel forever. But we are in the golden age of travel because we have so many aircraft. They're so efficient. They could keep having flights coming in and out. So if like one flight gets booked out, they'll have another flight available. And what does that mean? That means ticket prices are going to be low, right? So I don't think that there's that one key day anymore, or like one key time to book tickets. And now with websites like Skyscanner and Skiplagged, they basically search the entire web for flights, so they're searching like dozens and dozens of portals, and they're bound to give you a good deal, because different travel agents, different portals, they get their flights, they get their prices based on how many bulk flights they buy. So I don't think that that's I don't think that that matters anymore, so to say. However, I will say that flights are probably the most important part of booking, like especially a long weekend getaway, because flight changes don't tend to flight prices don't tend to change that much, whereas accommodation could come in many different price, formats. Like you could find a hostel, you could find an Airbnb, you could, my friend has a company called Holiday Swap, you could swap homes for $1.
Oh, wow.
So there's a plethora. Yeah, it's a great company.
I've never heard of that one. Yeah.
But there's like a plethora of prices available on accommodation, but flights, you're not going to see that much of a variety unless you're willing to, really like do many layovers and things like that. So flights should be like that number one expense that people look at when they're budgeting their trips.
Okay. And in terms of the platforms that you look at, you mentioned Skyscanner. What would you say there are certain platforms or search engines that are, that tend to give more affordable flight prices than others, or would you say that they're about the same?
So I do use Skyscanner religiously. I like Skiplagged a lot, but again, these are portals that search, the entire web. And when you see prices on one website that are a lot cheaper than the other, that there must be some sort of fine print in there. For example, it's not cancel, you can't cancel, you can refund it, you can't do a name change, you can't do a date change, things like this. Important to look at, because there's no way that one website is going to have a flight that's like $300 cheaper than the other. The other thing that I would suggest is actually travel agents often have really good prices on flights as well. Because the way that travel agencies work, they book out flights in bulk. So, for example, like let's say domestic travel, they'll book like, I'm just throwing it out there, 1,500 round trip tickets to Miami. So Delta Airlines in the States will give them a super cheap price because they're buying so many of them. And then they're able to pass that discount onto the consumer. So I actually really recommend calling a travel agent when you're looking for flights as well, because they're able to give good prices too. Not always, but if you're budget conscious, it's a good time to really do your research,
Okay, yeah, very good tip. So looking at, looking at various search engines or search platforms like Skyscanner, Skylag, I think you mentioned, right?
Skiplagged, yeah.
Skiplagged. Skiplagged. And because these search engines search the entire web, it's going to produce quite a comprehensive search result for you to choose from, right? And I think you've kind of compared two of these sites, you kind of already get the most comprehensive range that you would, and you can select.
Yeah. Just for me, it's like a sport. You know what I mean? Like, I just feel like, where can I find the cheapest? Literally, like all my friends, they ask me to look at flights for them, or they ask me because like I love it. Like for me, like where can I find the cheapest deal? Yeah, because listen, the cheaper your flight is, the more options you have like on the ground, you know, the more maybe you
That's
could
true.
spend more money on like a more luxurious hotel, or maybe you could eat at a like better
Souvenirs,
restaurant,
food.
or whatever it is. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and at the end
So
of the day, that flight is just gonna
what
get you there, right? Whatever you save,
yeah,
you have extra to
exactly.
spend on the ground, like you said. Yeah. Okay,
Exactly.
okay.
Yeah.
I like what you said. It's like a
I'm telling
spark
you, like I'm
looking for a
already
flight.
itching. Like I right now, like all I do is I just like look at flights, you know, every hour or so I'd be like, ah.
But I want to ask you, right? So I have experienced this before. For example, me in Singapore, I'm looking for, say, a return flight, London, Singapore, and I search. And then someone else in London is doing the same for me at the same time, searching for London, Singapore flights. Both of us come up with the same search result. So say Polish Airlines, London, Singapore. But the price that I get on my page is different from the one that is on that person's page. Do you happen to know why that is the case?
Yeah, there are many reasons for that. So one of the main reasons is that, you know, brands have different kind of marketing and strategies in different countries.
Yeah.
So you know, I don't know the exact answer to like this example, but just off the top of my head, if I think, you know, Singaporeans are able to spend more money, right? If their purchasing power is higher, and if, you know, this airline has done marketing research to know that Singaporeans are on average willing to spend, you know, 100 GBP more than the British, then of course they're going to bump up those prices. There are other
Yeah.
factors that come into play. So for example, and these are like, I don't know if there's proof of this, but these are kind of like rumored tactics. So if a website like Kayak or Expedia sees that you are constantly searching for a flight to a certain destination, their algorithm logic is that you must really want this flight, so you must be willing to pay more for it if they bump up those prices. So if you're not, you know, searching in incognito mode or deleting your cookies all the time, that's supposedly how their algorithm works when they see how you
Yeah.
search these flights. But yeah, but in general, sorry, that's my dog. But
No worries.
in general, I would say you can use VPN. And aside from VPN, I would say using browsing in incognito mode is the best
Yeah.
way for you to see the most reasonable prices that have nothing to do with your location, basically.
Yeah. Yeah. I think I've experienced that before. I'm monitoring flight prices a few days before purchasing like a big flight, like a long haul flight. And I'm kind of figuring out,
Yeah.
okay, when can I take leave, or when, it's the best time to fly. So I'm just kind of looking at prices. And then I realized that when I want to book it, the price has gone up. So I think there is some sort of
And you
algorithm,
know,
although there's no proof to that. Yeah.
to that point though, if you are looking at a flight, you know, this is a little more strategic, more complicated, but if you look at the bulk of the flight, like how much of the flight is full, the way that tickets are sold is, you know, you have different
By
categories of tickets.
classes, right? Yeah.
By class, correct. And some of these categories actually depend on how far in advance you're booking the ticket. So if that category class gets booked out in advance, you could literally have like a few hours of a difference. The flight will still be relatively empty, but because that first class is booked out, now you're already on to the next level,
Yeah.
you know? So now you're paying X dollars more for that same flight. Yeah, so those are also things to keep in mind. And if you do see that a flight is filling up, it is almost guaranteed, you know, that your ticket will be more expensive if you wait longer.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, okay. Yeah, those are very good tips about flights. Now, accommodation. What kind of advice or tips do you have, from the many years that you have been traveling? What kind of search engines do you look for? Do you prefer hotels to Airbnbs, for example? What's your take on that?
That's a great question. So I think so when you're booking your long weekend escape, flights should be that number one thing that you book, right? Because flights will really determine how much more money do you have left to spend on the rest of your trip, you know? So for me, and I know we spoke about this earlier, but when I travel, like I just want to go anywhere in the world, right? So of course I have like my bucket list destinations, but if you really want to see the world and do these long weekend trips, you kind of have to just be willing to go wherever is in your budget, right?
Yeah.
So using portals like Skyscanner, you could actually book, you could see everywhere as the destination, and you can see the cheapest prices to anywhere in the world for your given date range. So you could maybe from Singapore fly to like the Philippines for $200 one weekend, right? And it'll be so much more cheaper than you flying to like Beijing for $500 for the same weekend.
Yeah.
So once you kind of establish, you get the flight out of the way. So let's say you have a budget of like $1,200 for 4 days, everything included. So you have your $200 flight done. Now you have $1,000 left. And this is when you really decide what's important for you. Like, what do you really want to do in the Philippines? Do you want to do maybe boat tours and you want to just snorkel all day? You know that's probably going to cost a little more money, but you're also willing to compromise and maybe get a hostel, right? Or get like a 3-star hotel, because you know all you're going to do is you're going to sleep there. So people, you know, and that kind of just all depends on what your budget is, and B, what your preference is. Airbnb, I think over time has gotten a lot more expensive. Airbnb to me, I don't avoid it, but Airbnb is like the last place that I look, because in my experience, cleaning fees and all these things have gotten really pricey on Airbnb. So, you know, it again depends. For hotels, I use Agoda, Agoda. It is similar to like Skyscanner of flights. It searches the entire web for hotels. Agoda typically has fairly cheap prices. Expedia actually also has relatively cheap prices, I think for the same reason as travel agents, because it books out a lot of rooms, passes down the cheaper rates to the consumer. And then I was telling you, so my friend has a company called Holiday Swap, and it's where people all over the world, you pay a subscription fee monthly, but you're able to switch houses with people when you travel. So it's pretty cool. Like you could go somewhere and you could like stay in someone's apartment, and then when they're in your destination, they could stay in your apartment. Like there's different levels to the subscription package, but it's a really, really cool service. And I think it'll pick up a lot. Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, you mentioned it was for like $1. So how does that work? Say I go on the website. So I've not done this before, but say I go on the website and I say I want to go to New York City. So I find someone on that site who's willing to let me stay with them. In return, what do I sign a contract or an agreement that says, okay, next time you come to Singapore, you get to stay at my place for $1? Is it?
Yeah. So there's like many different levels to it, so I like really recommend going on the website. But on the basic level, you basically you sign up and you join this portal, and in theory, like if let's say you have an apartment in the center of Singapore, I have an apartment in the center of New York City, we are on the same level, right? So for that subscription fee, like when you come to New York, you could stay in this apartment. When they come to Singapore, they could stay in an apartment in the city center of Singapore. I don't think it necessarily has to be like yours, but it has to be on that same level.
Kind of level.
That makes sense.
Okay, that makes sense.
But there are different subscription options, and I know that they're like constantly innovating the space. So there's constantly like different, levels to it. But it's a great service. And I think after everything with COVID, many people are definitely looking into like staying in like renting homes, although I think hotels are generally doing a great job keeping everything clean, and taking all the right steps to ensuring safety of their customers.
Hopefully, in post-COVID, although I wouldn't really say post-COVID world, because I think, we are all living in a new normal right now. And I think, things hopefully will get better, but I don't think it will really ever be the same. I think it's more a new normal. But with technology and more of these platforms coming up like Expedia, or, instead of hotels, people have the options of Airbnbs. And like you said, I think you mentioned it was Holiday Swap.
Yeah,
someone asked the name of the website.
It's called Holiday Swap, HOLIDAY Swap, and they have an Instagram also, like a pretty big account where you could learn a lot of information too. But they're fantastic. So
so Holiday Swap is one, and you have all these kind of different ideas and concepts coming up, making travel more and more affordable for people who want to travel full-time, as well as work full-time and travel on the weekends.
Absolutely, yeah. And I think, You know, it's so simple. It's literally, you could create an Excel spreadsheet that will do all the math for you. You know what I mean? Like, you literally
Yeah.
just pop in the numbers that you see on these websites. It's gonna sum it up for you, and you'll see, okay, what fits my budget, what doesn't, you know, like where can I make room for it. Yeah, I mean, it's doable. It's just, you have to really want to do it and kind of
Yeah.
just do that a little bit of extra work of research. But I think the outcome is just, it's incredible, you know, how much you could see
Yeah.
right now and experience affordably, relatively,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, no, I agree with that. And we have a question from Asakura Fahim. Will you travel
Sure.
to mysterious place in the world?
Yeah, well, but see, like, I'm willing to travel anywhere,
Anywhere.
like literally anywhere, anywhere, anywhere. And that was always my mentality. Like, as soon as I really started venturing out, like UAE for me was that first, you know, at the time, this was 5 years ago when I went there for the first time. I saw it on TV on the Travel Channel. I saw the Sheikh Zayed Mosque, and I was like, oh my God, like, it's just like the most beautiful place I've ever seen. But to me, the Middle East was a war zone. It was like a horrible place for women. It was not safe. Like, that was my mentality, you know? So when I finally decided to just go because I wanted to see the mosque, really, that was the only reason I went to UAE, I realized that I was living in a bubble. I was living in a lie, you know? And then I started realizing this. I kept traveling to other places. And yeah, you know, you break out of that bubble and then you kind of just become obsessed. You know, you want to see more, you want to experience more, you want to talk to more people, hear more stories. And yeah, so for me, I will literally go anywhere. As long as it's, you know, within like reasonable realms.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, I think you mentioned Dubai in the Middle East, right? So that's one place that I also want to go to, Dubai. I've been to Dubai many times, but only on layovers. So from Kuala
Mm,
Lumpur or Singapore, I lay over in Dubai or Abu Dhabi or Doha, and then
right, right, right.
I get to London. But it's always only the airport, and I'm very impressed by the airport already. So, but I would actually like to step out of the airport one
Yeah.
day and see like the famous Burj Khalifa
What?
and all that kind of things. I have some friends working in Dubai, so would be interesting to go
Yeah,
and
you know,
travel.
and I
Yeah.
still see this happening today. And it's, you know, it's been already 5 years since my first trip, and I've been to Dubai 13 times in
What?
these 5 years.
13 times.
And yeah, but like I
And
still,
you're
you know, I
and
still
it
get
takes.
the
Yeah, yeah. Sorry, go on.
No, I was gonna say, like, I still get the occasional question of, do you feel safe? You know, like, are people nice there? And it's just like, it's mind-boggling to me. And I can't blame people, you know what I mean? Like, I get it. I was in the same boat. I wasn't just gonna, you know, burst out of my bubble and go to some random place in the world. But after I did that, it really was just only beneficial. So I really
Yeah,
recommend it.
yeah. Okay. One place on the bucket list for me then, Dubai, Middle East, step out of the
That's
airport. Um, so,
definitely.
among all the different places, I mean, you've been, okay, so you said you've done it for 5 years. How many places have you gone to, countries or cities have you visited in the last 5 years?
Over 60, but I don't really keep count, but it's definitely
Wow.
over 60.
60 places in 5 years. So that's
Yeah.
about 12 on average, about 12 trips a year, which is on average 12 a trip a month.
Yeah, so when I was working full time, I think I would do like every other month, but in
Yeah.
some trips I would do multiple countries, you know. So in
Yeah.
Europe, that's very easy to do. Like, you could easily do, you know, like Belgium, Netherlands, you know, like Paris in kind of in one shot. My first solo trip was Paris, Barcelona. You know, so it's pretty easy to do that there.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, like last year I think I did 32 countries.
Wow,
Yeah,
32 countries last year alone. That's insane.
yeah, something like that. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay,
So,
okay. And given that you've been to so many places around the world, what would be some of your favorites or most recommended places? Like a lot of us, we know Paris, Hong Kong, the kind of common go-to destinations. But
mhm.
are there places that are exotic, not you know, necessarily places that many people think about to go to when they think about going on a trip, where would you suggest?
That's a great question. I think the first one that pops into my mind is definitely northern Norway, where the Arctic Circle is. So Norway as a whole is just a beautiful country, and it's very multifaceted. Like there's just so much to do there, and every region is very different. But the Arctic Circle, there's just something about it that everything from the way that people live, like people don't close their doors in the Arctic Circle. Like locking the door is just not even a thing there, because everyone is just so kind and welcoming and happy, and there's like no crime. Everyone knows each other. But the Arctic Circle also changes with seasonality. So like in the winter, the sun never goes over the horizon. So it's actually always like this blue light kind of, and then there's like 2 hours of what they call sunlight in the most of the winter, and then late December there's no sunlight at all, and there's northern lights almost every single day. The food is incredible, you know, the people are super kind. It's just, it's, the nature is just, it's out of this world, and it's so unique. Like I have to say, I love Norway as a whole, but the Arctic Circle was just like a whole different life, you know, for me.
It sounds amazing. Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Norway is just, it's fantastic. Saudi Arabia has also been really exciting for me, just because it's so diverse, the landscape everywhere you go in the country, aside from the fact that even like culturally everyone's different, right? And traditions are different, food is different, language is kind of different as well, but the landscapes, like in some areas you feel like you're in Mars, in other areas you have this crystal clear Maldives like water. Also so super free.
Are these specific parts of Saudi Arabia, or
there are many, and I've only seen like a tiny little part of it. I would say that the latest one, I've been to Elona. It's a World Heritage Site. It's just, you know, it has been so untouched. So you walk around, like you could see certain like big rocks, and you could literally see inscriptions from way back when. Like it's just insane, and it's, you know, it's not covered or anything, you know, it's just there. Like people walk past it every day, locals walk past it every day, but it's like it's been there for thousands and thousands of years, you know. So Namibia was also very unique. Down south in Africa, so like you just ride around, and there are elephants, giraffes walking around everywhere. Like it was awesome.
Sounds exotic.
Those are just a few that come to my mind. There's so many. Mongolia also, you know, like 60% of the country is nomadic, so people don't have a home, you know, they just kind of roam around based on seasonality. So those would be my top, I think, 4 out of like unique places, you know.
Wow. Okay, so to sum up, that's the Arctic Circle. The Arctic Circle in Norway.
The Arctic Circle,
Saudi Arabia, Mongolia, and Namibia. I will be sure to put this on my bucket list. And you know, you mentioned about the Arctic Circle, right? And I think your description of the Arctic Circle and the Northern Lights in Norway was, it already sounds beautiful. Can't imagine what it would look like. But what would you say is the best season then to go to Norway, or to go to the Arctic Circle?
Well, so Norway is like, it's an incredible country because it's actually beautiful all year round, and you will have a different experience in Norway. And I think this goes for most of just like Scandinavia plus Iceland in general. So Norway has incredible beaches, and they also like literally look like the Maldives in the summer when like the sunlight is there. Then they have these so up north, I like being there in the winter because of the northern lights, because of the way that just nature is set up there in the winter, because you'll never get to experience that anywhere else in the world really, except for those countries. But it's beautiful all year round, you know, and it's cold in the winter, but it's worth it.
You have,
so aside from the other countries like Namibia, it's very hot, and their seasons are flipped with us, you know. So when I was there last July, actually I was there right now last year, it was really cold at night, you know, but warm during the day. Saudi Arabia also they have like different climates all over the country. They have snow. You know, when I was there in January, there was snow just like maybe 100 kilometers away from where I was.
Wow.
And most people don't even imagine that that happens, you know, in that region.
Yeah. You have many fans saying that Elona rocks. She's a frequent traveler. And I think I came across one interesting comment as well. Elona Anand Dreamer 12 says that Elona spends more time in the sky than on land.
Mm. He's a regular.
Okay.
He is a regular.
Yeah, so thanks for sharing with us, you know, some of your top kind of exotic, not the kind of
My pleasure.
what do you say, like not the kind of typical destinations that people would think of, but you know, for those who travel extensively like yourself, have special kind of places or gems that you know you've been to that you can share with us. So I think that that's great. And
I think everyone
yeah.
should have that one. I just, while we're on it, like I think everyone should have that one trip to a destination that will shock the hell out of them. Just one, you know, it may not be your like, you know, not every trip has to be one where you go to destinations where you'll get culture shock, but I'm almost confident that if you go to that one place, like for me, that place was, I guess it was both Norway and the Middle East, and it comes down to hospitality in both of those places. But when you know, when I live in New York and I come to a destination where people don't lock their doors, you are just like, what? Like how? You know? And it just changes your entire reality. Like you realize that people could live in inherently very different ways than you and survive, and you start to rethink, you know, the way that your outlook on life in general. So I really think everyone should have that one trip, you know, in a lifetime where it does that to them.
Yeah, I think that's a great tip, and I think you know that what you also said is about culture, right? How when we travel, we experience cultures somewhere else, a way of living that is unique to maybe that particular country or region that you don't necessarily find the same kind of culture or practice where you live, and that's something that I really like about traveling and exploring new places and new cultures. I like learning about new cultures, about new places, about ways of life in other areas of the world that is so different to say where I come from or where I grew up in or what I'm used to. Yeah. And so I run this channel on YouTube called Couture Culture, and it basically when I travel, I like to collaborate with people locally to kind of give my viewers an insight into the cultures, into the local cultures. So say last year I traveled to South Korea, to Seoul, Jeju Island, and I went to Italy, Montagnana, Venice, and I went to Bangkok in Thailand as well. And we did a lot of projects with the locals there. For example, in Thailand, we did about Thai dancing, Thai food carving, Muay Thai, you know, the form of martial arts there. And I really like kind of learning about cultures. I thought it's just something to mention since you said about, you know, some people should go to one place in their lifetime where, you know, they don't expect it to be what it's like. And I think that's a great tip. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And in terms of say like local activities that you do or you look, you know, to do in a certain place that you go to, how do you normally go about searching for local activities? Do you search online? Do you get tips from friends who've been there? What do you do?
Yeah, so I think this is where the importance of like bloggers and social influencers comes in, you know, because you obviously, like, I'm careful with the people that I follow. Like I know that the people that I follow I have to align with in terms of how I like to travel. But I think, you know, YouTube, looking at people's vlogs when they travel to certain destinations, specifically vloggers and bloggers and influencers, because they usually do stuff on the ground that TripAdvisor might not have, you know, or it might have, but it's not going to be like that first thing that you see. On a long weekend trip though, like I definitely like to do all of the touristy things. There's no shame in that. If you're going to a destination, you want to see the popular things, you know? So I think it's just a combination of everything. If I am actually planning a trip, which doesn't happen very often, I usually go to my first, like, my blog sources. I like the blog Abroad, Kristen, Nicole Isaacs is like one of my favorites. So there's a bunch. Eva Zubek, she's great. So I look at a bunch of blogs. I see what they've done there. I make a list. Then I do like the traditional Google search, a little bit of YouTube just to see. I like to go on YouTube to see food. So my friend TJ has a YouTube channel and she's a big foodie. So I always like whenever I travel somewhere, like I'll look at her vlogs to see like if I want to eat in any of the places where she eats. So yeah, things like that. I think that blogs can be very beneficial if you follow the right bloggers. You know?
Okay, yeah, because they can give you their first-hand experience, right? And their kind of authentic experience or what they thought, felt, or saw or went through when they were there, and they are kind of sharing it through their writing, through their pictures, through their videos.
Exactly. Pinterest also is actually great.
Okay.
I found a lot of inspiration on Pinterest as well. I think it's a very underlooked portal.
Yeah. And maybe tell us one more story about, how you say from New York City you took. So we talked about your trip to Dubai, and your trip to Bali, where you took. So to Dubai, it's 15 hours from New York City, and to Bali, it's 26-hour flight. Where else have you been in the world that, where you had a long flight and a kind of short, maybe 3-4 days there, and what you did there?
So it's important to say that being in New York, like I'm obviously very lucky to be in a big hub where we do have many flights, and these flights go everywhere in the world. I love Europe as a destination, actually, for the reason that we have many flights that get into Europe in the morning. So like London is one of those places because a lot of business people go to London. So they end up going on these late night flights out of New York, arriving in London at like 5 a.m. So you could literally start your day in London super early, and get a lot done. My first solo trip was Paris and Barcelona, and I did it in 4 days. So I had 2 days in Paris, 2 days in Barcelona, and same thing. So I got to Paris at like 6 a.m. And then my flight to so I spent 2 full days in Paris, and then my flight to Barcelona was also at like 6 a.m. So I got 2 full days in Barcelona and got back to New York before my bedtime.
Wow.
So, yeah, so that was one of those also. And I stayed in like boutique hotels in both destinations. So my goal really there was just to explore as much as possible. I didn't care about where I'm sleeping at night. I just picked a location that was central, and that's it. Nothing else really mattered.
Yeah. And I think you're quite right, in that you can actually cover quite a lot of places in just 2 days. So for example, my family and I did a Eastern Europe tour as part of my graduation trip. Graduation trip about a few years ago, and we did Eastern Europe in 8 days, 8 cities. So we were always, we traveled by bus around Eastern Europe, and we got to see Vienna in Austria. We went to Budapest, Hungary. We went to Prague. We went to we went to so many cities, and we covered all kind of the main attractions. I mean, you don't really get the benefit of staying 3 days in one place and to experience, the full kind of life there. But you get to see the main attractions and try some of the local food. And I think, when you kind of have 8 days holiday, you want to see quite a lot of places. It's possible to do, that kind of holiday. So how is that different from a weekend trip, right?
And it goes back to the point of you kind of get to sample, as many places as possible, and in 1 and 2 days you definitely see enough to understand if you want to come back. Speaking of Europe, like that was last year. We did 7 countries in 7 days. So we started in Ukraine by car with like one of my best friends, and we did Ukraine, Romania, Slovakia, Hungary, Poland. Then we flew to Paris, so we had that Paris flight. But like we did everything by car, and we had nothing planned. So literally, like that part of Europe is just so cheap that you could literally book, like on Booking.com, you could book an apartment for like $20 a night. Between 2 people, that's $10 a person. You know what I mean? Like it's absurd. And we were we would drive, so we really enjoyed our time in Slovakia. So we ended up staying in 2 places in Slovakia, and then we went to Czech Republic also. And then like Czech Republic, the area where we stayed in, we ended up like not sleeping there. We just drove straight to Poland. you know, but it's incredible, like doing things like that, and it's so cheap there. The food is affordable, the alcohol is affordable, like it's just, yeah, it's great.
Yeah, yeah. No, that's very interesting. And Ilona, talking about, I had a question earlier. What was it? Talking about your kind of your venture from being a full-time financial analyst into now a full-time travel content creator, right? Having a successful brand and lifestyle now, Elona the Explorer. Would you say that anyone can do what you do? If they love traveling and they travel on weekends or whatever their niche or their specialism is, and they do that because there's so many people who do this nowadays, right? Can anyone do this, or what is it that maybe makes someone successful in this area?
Yeah, that's a loaded question that I think would require a lot of time to answer. The short answer, I think, is yes. I am a firm believer that anyone could do anything that they put their mind to, and with enough hard work and consistency, you really can achieve anything. There are outliers, okay? I'm just gonna make that clear. There are definitely outliers or anomalies, but in general, hard work, perseverance, consistency will get you to where you want to be. With that said, for me, it was definitely a leap of faith in some way, but also having that financial buffer, where, for example, if you have enough savings to last you for, let's say, 3 months, where you could quit your job, right, and try to do something like this, and you give yourself 3 months of hard work nonstop every day to see if this is working out for you. And it's funny because the harder you start working, the smarter you start working, the more ideas you start to get, because when you're kind of on this like entrepreneurial road, you might want to start as like a travel blogger, but then after 2 weeks of super hard like travel blogging work, you're like, oh my God, I really like to write. Maybe I could be a journalist, whatever. That's just an example, So I think the decision, many people just want to travel full time and get paid for it, but the reality is you're never going to get paid unless you bring value. So unless you're bringing some sort of value to a given audience, this will forever be a hobby, and that's what sets people that are making money from people that are just traveling as a hobby, because eventually you have to start making sacrifices, you have to start, you're working hard, you're going to places maybe that you don't want to go to, but now you have to nurture your audience because that's what they want. And at the end of the day, you're still creating for them, right?
Yeah, you
So
have to deliver
like
some
this.
sort of value or benefit to your audience.
Absolutely. Right? And this goes for any business, you know what I mean? Like any venture that you want to take on. But I do think that if, you check off all of these boxes, then absolutely, there's plenty of room for talented people, you know what I mean? And this whole idea of this being a saturated space and there's too many, these are all like subconscious blocks, you know what I mean? This is all like things that you impose on yourself, back to our initial point. But yeah, I mean, eventually, like you figure out what your unique value prop is, or you figure out something else, but the freedom that comes with this kind of lifestyle is definitely, it's unparalleled, you know what I mean? So
yeah, thanks for sharing, Elona. I think very well said there. We have about 6 minutes to go on Instagram, but what I wanted to ask you, which I think, you have a very, very inspiring journey and story to tell. You fought cancer as a 10-year-old, as a kid. You underwent 2 years of chemotherapy, and I think you mentioned to me before 25 surgeries, correct me if I'm wrong. And then you fought cancer, and then you went on to working full-time, and you're now living your dreams, traveling full-time, creating content for people. What has this taught you about yourself?
Well, the most important thing that I learned early on that I think, has helped me now is just this idea of invincibility. Like, I am able to do anything that I want. I don't owe anyone anything, and that I kind of just live my life by my own rules. And I say this in very loose terms, and in the best kind of way possible. But this idea, we don't owe anyone anything, Of course, there are certain limitations to this, like, you give respect, right? But at the same time, it's a given. It's a given, but you still give it. You don't necessarily owe it. And I think that that's the problem. Many people think that they owe, their parents something, their family something, their employer something. But there's a fine line between understanding that this is one life. That's it. Done. This is all you have. So once you get into this frame of mind, I think we spoke about this some time ago about like this whole video game. It sounds like such a cliche, you live life as a video game, but if you start thinking about the moments that make you uncomfortable or people that make you uncomfortable, situations, recognizing that you could get out of those situations because you are fully in control of your own life will set you free. You know what I mean? And this mentality will set you, if you don't like something that someone does, theoretically you don't have to ever deal with it ever again if you don't want to. You know what I mean? So and obviously this comes in many different dimensions, and this isn't to say that you shouldn't have uncomfortable moments. You have so many moments of growth in life, but just recognize that this is your game, right? This is your show, and you decide who you want to keep in it, who you want to, like, what situations you want to go through, what situations you don't want to go through. At the end of the day, like, this is the strongest power that you have. And learning
Your
to
mind.
control your thoughts, your emotions. It's a lifelong, kind of like career in itself. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no,
Because
I
you will
agree.
always, situations change, and you'll have to figure out new ways of overcoming obstacles.
Or
But I think
adapting
it
to
all comes down
new situations, like
absolutely.
COVID, for example, right?
Yeah, exactly. But so I always think back through like my hardships, so to say, and what I went through, and I think about all the people that were kind to me and that did, starting from my parents and all the way down to my doctors and nurses who were complete strangers to me.
Yeah.
And I pay it forward in the same way, but also I remember that, like, if there's a situation or a person that makes me uncomfortable, I'm out. You know what I mean? And I am in full control of getting out. And so is everyone else. Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, Elona. Really appreciate you coming to
Thank you for
speak
having me
today. I think, you have a wonderful story to tell, from fighting cancer as a kid to working full time and then living your dreams, traveling the world, inspiring people to travel, to live life fully, to travel, to be able to keep their full-time job, to work a full-time job at the same time. You teaching people and inspiring people how to travel on long weekends and how to do so economically. And I think, that's a great message that you are spreading. And to sum up, the kind of tips that you have for your audience is traveling on long weekends. So say maybe taking Friday, Monday off so that you get 4 days to travel. And even if it's a faraway destination, planning in advance is very important. So planning your trips, going and also how to spend wisely on travel, looking on various search engines of flights like Skyscanner, Expedia, or on accommodation websites like Agoda or Holiday Swap. So I think, that kind of sums up how you can do long weekend getaways, at the same time do so within your means, right?
Correct. Yes, thank you. So I hope this was helpful.
Yes, that was very helpful. I'm sure everyone enjoyed it.
You.
And yes, thank you so much, Elona, again for joining us today. And thank you everyone for tuning in and watching and for all your lovely comments. And I'm sure Elona.
So I love you too.
Thank you very much, Elona. Have a great week ahead.
Thank you.
All right, bye guys.
Bye.
Bye.